Occupy Fantasy NFL DFS Week 3 lineup advice and our Q&A for FanDuel and DraftKings. Moose and Brian from OccupyFantasy.com here to break it down for you. Again, we're OccupyFantasy.com, at Occupy Fantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Yeah, I'm your host, co-founder, data guru here at Occupy Fantasy at CFB_Moose. And we got alongside Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter is where you can find him. He is the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. What's up, buddy?
What is up, Moose? Week 3. We're almost an underperforming wide receiver season. I can't wait. But another good slate ahead of us. Had some pretty decent results last week, so I'm excited to get back on the horse this week.
Yeah, you and I, we Tuesday's kind of our recap day before the $1 Million Mission. We talked about it. Feeling pretty good about this slate. There's some new additions. It should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to this slate.
Yeah, me too. And I think the big thing, as we'll probably talk about here for the next 30 minutes or so, are the injuries. And by this time on most weeks, we have a good grasp on who's going to play and who's not going to play. Yeah, can you hear me, Moose? Moose, I'm still here, so.
Yeah, sorry. The greatest thing, the thing I absolutely love the most about Discord is randomly it'll just switch your voice, your setting. So it was like, hey, do you want to connect to your headphones that you haven't paired with in 3 years? Thank you, Discord.
So I'm good now, right?
Yeah, you're good.
The Occupy Fantasy Q&A presented by Discord.
Yes. Completely true.
But yeah, so as I was saying, like this, usually we have a good grasp on who's playing and who's not playing at this point in the season, all right, in this point in the week. However, there are 4, 5, 6 guys that not only are questionable but have a big impact on the slate. So usually I'm done making my lineups by this time, and I'm just tweaking the rest of the day or tweaking on Sunday mornings. I haven't finished yet, just because I think you have to wait until tomorrow. I got most of my rules and stuff set up, but I think you're gonna have to wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, and as we talked about, on multiple streams before, if you're using our lineup builder, this is a perfect use for slate groups. I mean, there might be so many injuries. I don't know if enough slate groups even matter for that, but yeah, that's a great thing. Just for example, Brian, we talk about T. Higgins, wide receiver who's doubtful, but for some reason people think he's going to play. I don't understand that. I feel like if you're doubtful, you're not going to play. But you have a slate group with your 20 max, whatever, with him in the player pool and without the player pool. So if he's ruled out, you just switch to that slate group, no problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that one's kind of confusing too. And we'll run through each of these injuries now. If you guys have questions, throw them in the chat to the right of the video, and we'll answer them as we go along here. But yeah, really, there's 5 or 6 injuries, and most of them, it's like, okay, you can just leave him out of your player pool. But for like Dalvin Cook especially, if he's out, then Alexander Madison's an amazing play. If DeAndre Hopkins is somehow out, that like completely changes that game stack environment. So it's really tough.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you this. I don't have the salaries handy right now. I probably should have done this. But is there any sort of like Jalen Samuel situation for these running backs that we had last year where we can get a very, very cheap running back if one of these players are out?
I think so. There's 2 ways. You could, and it depends on the site, because if Dalvin Cook is out, right, that means Alexander Madison, who we've seen in the past when Cook has been out, gets 70% plus of the touches. It should be in a workhorse role. And on DraftKings, he's a little expensive at $6K. That's not really lock button material, right? But on FanDuel, he's $5,200, and there aren't many running backs in that range. So I could definitely see lock buttoning Madison on FanDuel, whereas on DraftKings, and I still don't think I would do this, if Darrell Henderson is out, who we haven't talked about yet, then Sonny Michel is only $4,900, and he would get most of the workload, but doesn't play a ton in the passing game and is facing, obviously, the toughest rush defense of the last, 5 years. So I don't know. Madison on FanDuel, maybe. But it's a gross week of running back anyway, so I wouldn't fault anybody if they wanted to do it.
Yeah, that's excuse me. Sorry for the cough. But
you okay with that, Moose?
Yeah, I'm good. Just having a good old time. So yeah, we talked about the running back situation there. And always fun to have a gross week of running back. But let's talk about these wide receivers. So, Brian, there's 4 receivers. We already talked about T. Higgins that we're waiting to hear some injury clarity on, if you want to talk about them as well.
Sure. So we'll start with the biggest one, DeAndre Hopkins. And he hasn't practiced all week. Listed as questionable. But if you've played NFL DFS before, if you played season long, you followed the NFL, Hopkins routinely doesn't practice throughout the year. This sounds slightly more concerning than his other previous unpracticing weeks. But most people seem to think he's going to play. AJ Green, they asked him, he's like, yeah, D-Hop's going to play. So they seem to think he's going to play. I think it's fine to build lineups with him in it. And that is an early game, so we'll know pretty early. The other receiver, you talked about T. Higgins. I don't think we'll play him anyways, but it's something to monitor. Could boost the floors of Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. Kenny Galladay is questionable, and I think he might be truly questionable, just based on some of the practice reports and what the beats are saying. So that would boost Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard as well. So it's a week full of question marks and game time decisions. I'll say that.
And that's what makes it fun. I mean, also, I think it also, helps, because if that's the case, like, even maybe I'm giving people too much credit or not enough credit, but I still feel like if any of these players are ruled out, they're still going to get 1% ownership in these top large field GPPs and the double ups. That takes away some of the rake.
Oh yeah, we'll believe me, we'll take it. Whatever we can get it, we'll take it. The one that you mentioned earlier that I didn't talk about is Antonio Brown. It sounds like he's going to be unable to play. The way the protocol works for vaccinated players, you have to test. You have to have 2 negative tests within 24 hours apart and not have symptoms. We don't know about the symptoms part, but it sounds like he hasn't even passed 1 test yet, so that would be very difficult for him to play. If he doesn't play, so obviously that boosts Godwin and Mike Evans, but now we get a really cheap Curtis Samuel game stack piece and probably Scotty Miller. If you look at, because Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson have kind of split the wide receiver 4 duties so far this year, but Scotty Miller is playing more of the role that Antonio Brown has been playing, which leads us to believe that Scotty Miller would be the guy who benefits the most, and he's super cheap and opens up a ton of things in that game stack.
Yeah, I mean, not to give away anything behind the paywall on the plug, but that pretty much is in that game stack section of the Tampa Bay side. It's play Scotty Miller if Brown's inactive.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Hawk Dark here says, what's your thoughts on Cephas or Hardman in my Stafford 3-1 stack with Van Jefferson? I have 3,900 left over because Kelsey and Eckler's in it.
Yeah, that kind of makes it tough, right? I think you usually, if I assume you're making this lineup for a large field contest, if it's a small field contest, you can go Hardman. Generally, for me, Moose, unless both players are really underpriced, I try to avoid 2 players from the same team in the same lineup if they're not a part of a game stack. So like that would be 2 KC players, no LA players in it. I would try to avoid that at all possible because you really want in a large field contest every player in your lineup to have the ability to capture most of the scoring. You really don't want any other crumbs for anybody else on their teams.
Yeah, you pretty much hit that on the spot. And so, a great question, Hog Dart. If you guys have any more questions or you just want to say hello or anything like that, chat's over there on the side. We're here till about 2:30. Go ahead and break it down. Brian, I want to ask you if I can pull up the model here on the back end. Some of these team total moves that have happened, and let's go ahead here. If we look at team total moves, there's 2 teams that have had a positive team total increase. Tampa Bay at plus 1.75 since opening, and Detroit plus 1.25. And you were talking about it before, where not even game stacking that last game with Detroit Baltimore, but only doing a one side with just Baltimore, and bringing it back with Detroit, not even playing any of the Detroit game stacks. What's your thought process on that?
So, to me, right, there's that team total increase stood out to me a little bit. I actually think it's going to keep increasing over the weekend. Baltimore put 4 starters from defense, or 4 players who play decent snaps, on the COVID list, and most are along the defensive line. And I think those guys combined for 79 or 80 snaps last week. So a significant portion of their defense. And as a result, this game could be higher scoring than we initially anticipated if Baltimore, and they are, is missing a good chunk of their defense. So to me, I don't know if Jared Goff can support a 3-by-1 stack, nor do I think we really want to play 2 separate Detroit players. I guess maybe like Swift and Hawkinson could work. But to me, this just means that they should be able to keep up a little more and force Baltimore to keep the foot on the gas more than they could have initially. So to me, playing Lamar Jackson 3-1 stacks, running it back with Hawkinson, running it back with Swift or Cephas, whoever it may be, I mean, that's a big thing. And a lot, most we talk about defensive injuries or defensive inactive players is a big deal when looking at game stacks. And most of the time, Vegas picks up on that, and Vegas is picking up on that, which just gives us even more confidence in it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about how certain defensive matchups don't matter until there's an injury or a player out. Then it actually starts to become significant. Question here from Chris says, instead of Madison/Michelle, what are you thinking about Saquon, Brian? Honestly, super cheap and definitely starting. Been thinking more about that today.
Yeah, the nice thing about Saquon is, I don't think most people expect him to get that big of a workload on the Thursday night game, right? Short week. Everyone said he would be eased into action to start the season, but he got like 80% of the snaps in work. So 10 days off, I think we're expecting another full workload, or at least close to a full workload. And to me, his price is crazy cheap. We look, he's 6,500 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. FanDuel especially, he's like incredibly cheap. And I think the projected ownership picks up on that 20% there. And when I was running my initial builds this morning, just to try to get my rules in and see what's possible, I was getting a ton of Saquon Barkley. So that should let you know that he's probably a pretty good play this week.
Nice. Question here from Aaron says, who's your favorite low-priced wide receiver? I am on to Barrios, Cephas, and Jones Jr.
Let's see. I'm going to pull up the model here, and I'm going to look at receivers under 4K on DraftKings. And my favorite is... Oh, wow, it's gross down there, huh? To me, I think it's Van Jefferson. He's running a ton of routes, and he's playing in a game total of 56 points. If Henderson's limited, they could throw even more. So I think Van Jefferson is my absolute favorite in that range.
Okay, I can see that. And he's, like I said, it's going to be 1%. So if you play him in even just 5% of your lineups, you're getting some leverage if he scores touchdowns.
I'll let you know. I'll have more of that tomorrow because I'm game stacking a game, and he's a cheap piece. So
I try to be conservative. I'm surprised you didn't say our good friend Trinity Benson. I'm just looking here at the model.
Believe me, I played enough Trinity Benson in that showdown slate. I don't need any. I think I met my quota for the year on Trinity Benson exposure.
Yeah. Back to quarterbacks, Brian, because I know like with wide receivers and there's like running backs, there's injuries that's going on. We do have the OF change column for all positions for NFL, and how are you using that at all? A question I got was, are you using that at all in determining who you potentially game stack for your quarterbacks?
It definitely helps, right? Like we see that golf, unsurprisingly, has the biggest OF change since the model went live of +7 points. That shouldn't surprise people when we see the injuries come into play, right? The model knows everything. So seeing him +7 points, but then seeing Stafford move up, Brady move up, Mahomes move up, just kind of solidifies those game stacks that we really like. So more so than anything, I'm looking for justification, and then secondarily, I'm looking to see if any of the injury reports on Friday have impacted it, and I think that's where golf's primary driver is.
Yeah, no. Anytime I see that, and I'm like, okay, that's great. And then you also have the team total increase as well. It's like, all right, the model knows something going on with golf. People, which is crazy. Only 5,200 on DraftKings is pretty nuts.
Moose, you getting some ideas over there? You think about stacking Detroit, maybe?
I mean, this is bad plays only, right?
I mean, it's really not incredibly bad if you play golf with DeAndre Swift, who's a pass-catching running back. You play with T.J. Hockenson, who has an insane target share. That's not the worst three-man stack. Then you can run it back with Marquise Brown or Tyson Williams or, God forbid, double tight end Mark Andrews. But I think there's a path there. There's a path there. I don't think I'm going to do it in my 150, but I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world.
I'll save that for my mini max on FanDuel. So if it doesn't hit, don't worry. I just lost 5 cents. It's okay.
That's a good point.
One thing I wanted to point out: if you sort by OF index change, and you look at the people who have dropped since opening, basically just bad quarterbacks, just like not good quarterbacks. The exception of Justin Fields, I thought that was a little bit different. I guess because they're such a huge underdog. But even then, that one kind of surprised me that he's dropped since open.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising, right? Because he's our cover boy. He's probably the value quarterback this week. One of the top projected, especially on DraftKings, right, where we need cheaper quarterbacks. But yeah, Fields. The thing is, the model, admittedly, the model is biased against rushing quarterbacks, because built for tournaments. And, we're looking for guys who can either rush for 100 yards, throw 3, 4 touchdowns, ideally both, right? And I think Fields for tournaments is probably just in a tougher spot than it needs to be. Plus, like, we're not 3-1 stacking that game, so I think I understand it.
Yeah, no, you pretty much hit there. Hog Darkness, what's your thoughts on Tyson Williams? I know you talked about it, Brian, having him as a run back on a Detroit stack, but I'm guessing you'd also play him in your game stacks as well.
Yep, exactly. He's actually getting more pass work than most Baltimore running backs typically get, which is nice. Plus, he's easily the most dynamic running back. The fact is he'll probably be vultured a few times by Latavius Murray in the red zone, but I think Tyson Williams has the best chance for 100+ yards in this game at the running back position. So for me, I think game stacks only, because again, we're looking for guaranteed volume if we're not playing game stacks. But if this game goes 50+ points, Tyson Williams would definitely benefit from that, and I think he can be part of a game stack that way.
Nice, I like that. Speaking of running backs, Brian, I'm going to give you our top 5 DraftKings projected running backs. So these are the most popular plays. Which one are you fading, or are you going under the market on? Or if none, then you can explain why. But Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, and Alvin Kamara are the top 5 projected in terms of ownership running backs for tomorrow's slate. Any of them you're going under the field on?
Yeah, I'm not playing Dalvin Cook at all. I'm not playing him, even if he's active, right?
Yeah.
Here's what we know. We know that high ankle sprains are a death sentence for running backs. It is very, very tough for a running back to not only get on the field, but be productive when on the field. We've seen numerous running backs have a high ankle sprain, try to gut it out, and the efficiency just drops off the table. So Dalvin Cook's high ankle sprain is definitely of the minor variety if you listen to medical professionals that you trust. And the fact that he hasn't practiced all week is a little concerning. Mike Zimmer said on Wednesday, yeah, he's going to be good to go. He's going to practice. We expect him to play. We're going to give him a bunch of touches. But, as you read about high ankle sprains, the earlier through the injury, it's why he was able to return to the game. High ankle sprains, and for anyone who's ever had one out there, they're absolutely miserable. The swelling and the soreness really starts developing like 2-3 days after, right? So after the injury happens, you might think I can get this out, be okay. But then once you sleep on it and it swells up, it becomes so hard to play on. I think he's gonna gut it out, but at that price tag, 9,500 FanDuel, 8,400 DraftKings. I mean, his efficiency has to be there, and we can't guarantee that, and we can't even guarantee a full workload. So to me, I'm not playing him. I don't care what reports come out. I'm not playing Dalvin Cook. The only way I'm touching that backfield is if he is out and Madison is a starter.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about the high ankle sprain because both of us played basketball. Both of us have had ankle sprains. You've had one that's way worse, and it's nothing worse than you wake up. You think you're fine. You wake up the next day and you're like, I can't walk. I literally can't walk. And
this shit is like a basketball size, yeah.
Yeah. I can only imagine trying to just run, being a running back, and just getting absolutely pounded for like 30
because
plays.
like receivers, other positions, they're not cutting as much, right? Like you have to plant your foot as a running back and change direction. It's just the worst position to have that injury. So, ideally he rested for a couple weeks and he's back to normal because, and the amount of cases we have with running backs with high ankle sprains, you don't have enough hands to show that how bad of an injury it is for running backs. So, we'll see. Maybe it burns you, but to me, again, we talk about high levels, like heuristics, right? Most like if to not get into too nitty gritty of details for NFL classics. If the wind's over 20 miles per hour, I'm not playing the passing game. If I'm trying to think, if a running back's gonna get high volume, I'm playing him. The other one is if a running back has a high ankle sprain, I am not playing him. And again, there are going to be outliers where that burns you, but over the course of time, these high level strategies are going to pan out.
Yeah, and this is the medical section of the Occupy Fantasy Daily Plug. So, Occupy Doctors, let's go.
There's definitely a target audience for that if we look at Twitter, right?
Yeah. Let's see here. Is it okay to add a secondary stack in 3-entry max and single entry?
Yeah, it's probably advisable to do that, right? 150, it's not something I try to force in, but if I'm playing a single lineup, it's a large field contest, I would try to get that correlation in there.
Yeah. I'm just looking really quick at college football because I'm playing college football DFS, and it's like I looked at the box score and I have the Texas stack and they have 49 points, and I'm like, oh sweet, let's go. And like none of my players are in that. I'm just like, this is great.
That's actually the worst.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. Ken, here's a question. It says, who are the other cheat pieces you'd like from your other game stack? Seattle, Minnesota, Kansas City, Chargers.
So for Seattle, it feels like we just all of our variants ran hot with Freddie Swain last week as the cheat piece, right? Caught the long touchdown. Same with KJ Osborne. I don't know if we can hit that again. I mean, that's like incredibly unlikely. But those are the guys, right? The cheap wide receiver threes are what you're looking for. Gerald Everett did play more snaps in week 2 at tight end, so maybe he's the guy for Seattle. Minnesota, Conklin, I think, as a tight end could get there as well. KC, it's pretty much McCole Hardman for me. I guess Clyde Edwards-Helaire if you like the running back position. And for the Chargers, it's Jared Cook and Jalen Guyton. Both those guys are just playing a ton. I mean, most of the time it is the wide receiver 3 or the tight end that we're looking for to get as those cheap pieces.
Yeah, you pretty much hit that one there on the spot. Cool. So we have about 9 minutes left or so. Going back here, let's take a look at the model. Let's go back over to wide receivers, and we talked about some cheap pieces. And there's definitely one name that keeps sticking out. It burned us last week. It's probably going to burn us again this week. With Cooper Kupp, projected to be 20%. Brian, there was a stat you put in our staff chat. I can't remember which one it was, that showed basically Cooper Kupp's going to ball out tonight. Or tomorrow night. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it was Chris put it in there. Someone tweeted that, the Bucks blitz a ton, and Kupp is like basically exclusively targeted on blitzes from Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, the thing we know is the volume is going to be there, right? That's been pretty consistent through 2 games, 35% plus of the targets or something crazy. To me, it's his touchdown scoring has been crazy. If you look at expected points, is how we determine underperforming wide receivers. Cooper Kupp has scored 32 more fantasy points than he's expected to based on his usage. And that's insanity, right?
Yeah.
That's absolute insanity. So maybe he's a Devontae Adams type outlier this year where he's going to score more than we expect. But more than 16 points more per game is crazy. We can expect him to drop off pretty soon. I'm not willing to play that guy at 20% ownership, but I will play him in game stacks this week just because of, we know that reduces ownership as a result.
Yeah, you have to play. If you're stacking that game, you absolutely have to. But Brian, do you even think it could be possible you could have him as your bring back?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Yeah, I think again, we see that all the time that it reduces ownership. So, 20% for a receiver is kind of tough. It's kind of tough. Yeah, man, it's gross. He might do it again. But you would think maybe fucking other teams start guarding him at some point this year. So, yeah, I mean, because it's not like he's like Devontae Adams, right? Who's like getting like legitimate targets on the 1 yard line, or like just completely dominating one-on-one. It's all scheme based, right? So you would think opposing, it's not all scheme based, right? Obviously he's a very talented guy, but you would think opposing teams would eventually start taking that away, which makes me think that he's more likely to be affected by this variance than say someone like Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just don't guard him and hope he drops a pass, which
right,
like that's what's been happening the last 2 weeks. Question here from Remy says, when stacking in the big $3.20 max in your 3x1 stacks, do you fill out the rest of the lineup with the top plays in the plug?
Yeah, for the most part, right? We're looking for high volume running backs. We're looking for underperforming wide receivers or top ranking wide receivers, and Chris does a great job of that. Remember that Chris mostly writes the article for low risk contests, right? We're trying to find the best low risk plays. Sometimes that will line up for your high risk lineups. But for me, I'm playing popular, high volume, high ranking model running backs, high ranking receivers in the Occupy model.
Yep, and just remember, for running backs, we do have the projected weighted opportunities in the model, so you can just sort by that. I mean, that's literally what I do. Is I just sort by projected weighted opportunities. Who's over 30? Boom, they're in my player pool.
Pretty much, and there's only especially this day and age, there's only 5 to 7 guys per week, right? So
yeah, that, and then again for wide receivers, you can look at targets. If someone's projected, I'm sorting by targets here. Looks like Juju is number 1, projected to get 11 targets. Like, those are great plays at 2% ownership.
Oh yeah, because if Deontay Johnson's out, that opens up more for him and Claypool, right? So
Exactly, yeah. And again, that's a lot opportunity based, especially in like low risk too. If you want, you just got to get the opportunity.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. The only position we haven't really talked about is defense. And I'm bringing up the side of the model here. Good old Cincinnati is ranked number 1 in our model. Again, this is built for high risk contests. They have a decent line move. Okay, low total, but the opposing team totals dropped. What's your take on Cincinnati's defense? I know we just talked about Juju getting like 20 targets, but
I mean, one, they're incredibly cheap. They're not that popular. Actually, I mean, especially on FanDuel, they're 3% projected. The big thing is, right, we have Pittsburgh's injuries. They allow pressure. Cincinnati's been getting a decent amount of pressure. And the betting markets are just all over it, right? They're capitalizing on these Pittsburgh injuries. The line has moved from Cincinnati +5 to +3, which is just massive. And the game total has dropped. Pittsburgh's team total has dropped from nearly 25 points to 23 points. All this just adds up, especially with Big Ben just being dust. Cincinnati being the top-ranked defense by a pretty significant margin, Moose.
yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that. I just got the alert that not the backup quarterback scored. I'm just tilting very hard now.
The Texas Tech game, I noticed the starting quarterback went out, so that's probably why you're tilting so much.
Yes, I am. All right, sorry. What did you say again about Cincinnati?
They're all good.
Yeah.
Tons of great reasons to play them.
They're very good. Yes, they are. No, and I might have to just stack that game just because. Ken says, who are the running backs you like paying up for Henry and Kamara or using 6K range guys?
I both in 150, right? Henry and Kamara are the guys I'm getting like 20% of, but it's really most of my allocation is in that 6K range. So guys like Chris Carson, guys like Najee Harris, guys like Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon especially. Eckler's kind of in the middle there, 7,200 DraftKings. But yeah, I guess if I had to choose, the answer is more of those 6K running backs.
Okay. What's your thought on Swift?
Yeah, great passing game opportunity. We know that's worth more than rushing the ball for fantasy purposes. And Baltimore's got those injuries or the COVID designations we've talked about. Swift's a great play.
47 yards for Thompson.
Definitely.
10 carries.
All right, the thing I hate about ESPN, I'm just going to say, is they start randomly playing video, and so they just played the crowd cheering. Scared the fuck out of me.
Dude, always. ESPN is notorious for randomly playing videos.
I had no idea what was going on there. Anyway, all right, we got a minute left. So if you have any last lingering thought questions, now's the time to ask. Brian, is there anything we didn't really talk about or anything you want to bring up?
No, nothing fantasy-wise. I will say, if you've been on Twitter, you know that Mike Tagliere of Fantasy Pros passed away due to COVID, and I've never personally worked with him, but you could just tell by what everyone is saying on Twitter about him that he was a good dude, great family guy, excellent analyst. And so, our thoughts go out to his family. And, we're not one to tell people where to spend their money or whatever, but they are doing fundraisers for the family. And obviously, you feel terrible for his wife and his kids and anyone who's close with him. So, from Occupy out to Tagliere's family, our thoughts are with you.
Definitely, thoughts are with you. Just a completely terrible situation. Yeah, as Chris said, switched it over. We're gonna get DC made over that 4-second clip. So, from ESPN.
Yep.
Definitely. All right, so I think that'll pretty much wrap it up. Again, if you like what you saw, definitely hit that thumbs up. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Doing these streams weekly. I'll posting other videos throughout the week. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Brian's also posting TikToks if you want to get in on that action as well, if that's your thing. But until next time, we'll be back on Tuesday for the $1 Million Mission. Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Have a good one.